All right, well, hello everyone. Thank you for watching. This is my Sunday homily, YouTube edition, for the 23rd Sunday of Ordinary Time. A little late as usual, sorry about that, still trying to work out the system here. But I wanted to take the message into a kind of a different direction for this Sunday, because the gospel was one of those nice ones where Jesus heals some guy. In this case, he restored his hearing and his speech. So he heals a guy, sends him off his way. It's a happy ending. There are a few of them like that in there. And today I wanted to address the contrast between that gospel story and Jesus Christ suffering horribly and dying on the cross. Yes, that is a very jarring separation. That is quite a contrast. But the reason for that, the point is, there's that line that was said while Jesus was on the cross. He saved others, and yet he cannot save himself. The gospel reading we had for today's gospel, pardon the redundancy on that, the reading we had for our gospel today is where that phrase comes from. You see, Jesus spent 3 years of his life going around helping people and doing amazing things. He cured leprosy, a basically incurable wound at the time, incurable disease at the time. He raised the dead in the form of his friend Lazarus. He made the blind, he restored the sight to the blind. He calmed the very waves of the sea. And let's not forget, he turned water into wine. Always a good PR move. So he does all these things. And then at the end of the 3 years, he goes to Jerusalem, gets into trouble with the authorities, gets arrested, is savagely beaten, and then suffers and dies on the cross. So when all that happened, the people who knew Jesus, or at least knew of him, were a little confused. He did all these amazing things. What's going on? They were waiting for Jesus to get the last laugh. They were saying, come on, Jesus, float down from the cross and let the wounds in your hands and your feet just magically close. That wouldn't be any more difficult than the other amazing things you've been doing for the last 3 years. And as the afternoon wore on, it became more and more clear that Jesus was not getting out of this one alive. And as they came to realize that, these people probably thought things to themselves like, I guess he was faking it the whole time. Or, well, that Jesus, he was a pretty cool wizard for 3 years, but he has apparently run out of tricks. Or maybe just, I guess I heard the stories wrong. I just see a common criminal up there. I don't see anything amazing. He's just some guy who made an enemy of Rome. And as they thought these things, the faith they had in Jesus just melted away. Think of the disciples in the story of the road to Emmaus. I think Judas is probably the one who lost the most amount of faith in the least amount of time. Because I'll remind you, Judas was a big believer of Jesus, absolutely. But this was not the ending that he was expecting. I mean, not even Peter succeeded in seeing any meaning or purpose to all of this, even though Jesus spent considerable amount of time and effort preparing his disciples for what they would witness in what we now call the passion of Jesus Christ, his suffering and his death. So again, the whole idea is, as modern Christians, how are we supposed to make sense of all this? How can we believe that Jesus did amazing things for those 3 years and yet suffered such an end? How do we reconcile those two pieces? And to that, I want to draw your attention to a book. It's the most important book we had to read in the seminary in preparation for hospital ministry, caring for sick people. And that book is called The Wounded Storyteller by Arthur Frank. Link in the description. The Wounded Storyteller is a beautiful book. I recommend you read it even if you've never been sick. And the whole idea of the book is when we get sick, when we are wounded, when we get cancer, when we lose literally an arm and a leg, whatever, when we get sick, we can own the reality of our sickness by telling our story. There is power in telling your story. So if someone can say, I am addicted to heroin, that's my disease. I am always going to be addicted to heroin for the rest of my life, but I strive to be a recovering addict, someone who says no to the drug. If someone can say something like that, that's a tremendous advantage in dealing with the bad hand that life has dealt you. So in addition to that major premise, the book goes on to explain that a wounded person can essentially tell one of three kinds of stories: restoration, chaos, quest. The obvious one is restoration. That is when you get sick and then you are restored to health and life goes back to exactly the way it was before you got sick. This is obviously the story we want after we get bad news in the doctor's office. And Jesus Christ knew restoration narratives, no problem. He restored people all the time. He was happy to do it. So yeah, Jesus, no stranger to that. The second kind of story is called a chaos narrative. That is when you are in a bad place and it feels like there is no escape. You are sick. There is no cure for what you've got. You are in pain. You are suffering. That is your entire life. And you think, when you're in a chaos narrative, you think, I am never going to be happy again. I'm never going to be at peace again. My life is never going to have meaning again. Chaos narratives are terrifying. The book does explain chaos narratives end. They do, but they feel like they will last forever. And the book says, when you're in a chaos narrative, there's no going back. You can't get out of a chaos narrative the way you came in. Your only option is to see it through and puncture through the other side. And that leads us to the third thing, the quest narrative. A quest narrative is when you get sick and you choose to roll with it. You know your life will never be the same again, but you are going to learn from your wound. You are going to grow in some way because of your wound. One classic example of that, when someone is diagnosed with cancer, they tend to grow in compassion and understanding for other people who have to go through the chemo, lose their hair, go through tons of doctor's appointments, all of that. That's a classic example of a quest narrative. People get cancer, but even though that's something they would obviously never want, some good still came about it in the form of spiritual growth. So with all of that said, let's get back to Jesus. Jesus' cross was his quest narrative. Jesus had a mission, and it was not to stay the same forever. Okay? God the Father didn't say, Jesus, go down there, be a doctor, do as many people as possible, keep your head down, and just stay the same for as long as possible. Not his mission. Jesus' divine mission was a quest narrative, and he knew that he would have to give his life for that quest. And he owned that necessary death. For his death is salvation. It is absolutely essential. Jesus understood that, and he accepted it, and he owned it. No one takes my life, but I lay it down of my own free will. Some say Jesus saved others, he cannot save himself. It is more accurate to say Jesus restored others, but he would not restore himself. For Jesus' divine mission was to endure and power through the chaos and the pain and the suffering of the cross, for he knew that that was the only way to reach the glory of the resurrection.